Welcome back, take two. So Ornament, we're rolling today with the theme of Ornament. And I have absolutely no idea how I am going to draw Ornament without going the obvious route. There is always I should have thought about this more before I started the stream. There is always the idea of ornamentation, I suppose. But I think I will just go the obvious route. And I'm not talking a lot today just because this is kind of a complex shape, and I know I'm not drawing all the complexity to it, but I'm thinking about, lines like this one here, which would be the shape of this ornament bisected, which informs me on where the top and the bottom of this hole is going. And then it's not a perfect uh, oval or circle from this angle, and probably needs to be opened up way, way more. Because I'm going to see more of it, more of this hole on this side than on the far side. So I'm trying to process all of these shapes as I'm sketching out a much more mundane object than I typically draw. And I'm also kind of planning ahead for some of the shapes that are going to go on the bulb. Bulb is a really weird word. And then this is completely wrong because I was concentrating in other areas when I sketched that. But there's going to be a loop at the top. There's always a loop that that the hook attaches to. And a lot of ornaments have that loop integrated into the design. And they never don't look weird. Much better. And I know it's Halloween, and I'm thinking obviously along the lines of a Christmas ornament, but I've been designing Halloween ornaments for the last few weeks to put out in the lawn. Kind of see where I'm going here. It's weird. It doesn't show up on camera very well unless it's in shadow from the main light. So I'm kind of halfway thinking, can I do a Halloweeny Christmas ornament? And of course, the knee-jerk response to that is Nightmare Before Christmas. And I don't really want to do that kind of a take on it. And only partially because I think I can only slightly remember Jack Skellington's design. I mean, he's got the obvious round skull and bat bow tie, but Yeah, that's about as far as I can get. It's been a number of years since I've watched that. And I don't know why. It's one of my sister's favorite movies. So you would think it would get rewatched on a frequent basis. We go through the debate in our house every time it starts getting on TV. Is Nightmare Before Christmas a Halloween movie or a Christmas movie? Well, obviously it's a Christmas movie. It's not the Halloween. It's not the Nightmare Before Halloween. It's like asking if How the Grinch Stole Christmas is a Christmas movie or a hoarding movie. I just had a random thought strike the edge of my brain, and it rebounded a little bit around my skull. It kind of went ping, ping, ping as it hit the edges and continued to bounce around. There was the sound of shattering porcelain. I'm not even certain what that could have possibly been. But since I didn't draw over the weekend, I didn't stream, I did not get to do a dragon drawing. There was ash and there was dragon. And on Monday, I considered incorporating it into all three Mondays, Saturdays, Sundays, and Mondays, all into one drawing. And I didn't do it. Partially because I thought it would be a little too ambitious, but mostly because I'm lazy. But drawing these, for some reason, these ornaments with the opening in them always have this beaded border. And drawing those beads started making me think of dragon scales. And could I incorporate a dragon into this? And you know what? Yes, I can. And it's not going to be just any dragon. It's going to be a dragon egg. Whoops, art sin. Wrong eraser. I'll have to do some Hail Prismacolors after this. mentioned before, day before yesterday, I think, that that I typically work in black and white. I do line art mostly because I can't work in color, being red and white colorblind. Red and white? Wow, that would be horrible. Red and green colorblind. I'm a mild pro-tan. Or, as they say here in Texas, a mild proton. So, being a mild proton means that I have fewer receptors for red and green. And as a result of that, I often get hues of red and hues of green confused. Well, I shouldn't say confused. I should say they trigger the same retinal response. And so my visual experience of those colors ends up being so similar that I frequently can't tell the difference, especially if those colors are part of other colors. Now, there's a little bit of science behind it, and I'm sorry for getting a little nerdy, but the way that the eye works is there's really only 2 or 3 types of receptors. I want to say 2 types of receptors, but I think it's 3. So there's the one that determines red and green, and it determines it on a spectrum. So if it's white, it'll be in the middle. If it's more red, it'll go one way. If it's more green, it'll go the other. The other is yellow-blue, and much less common type of color blindness. And again, if it's right in the middle, your eye will see white, and it compares these two together to get, if it's red in, this far on the red spectrum, this far on the blue-yellow spectrum, it's going to look like a very reddish purple. So your brain mixes these colors together. And while the red-green or blue-yellow receptors only respond to certain color wavelengths, they respond on a spectrum of wavelengths. So the closer it is to red, the more response you get, etc., etc. So as a result, I have much better perception of intensity of color, but less perception of colors when dealing with red and green. Which means all through high school, as I was trying to develop my first comic book, every time I developed a character and colored it in, I would get asked silly questions like, why is the skin green? Well, obviously the skin's not green. Skin is skin colored. But I started to shy away from working with color as a result of that. And when I was doing graphic design and web design back in the early 2000s, it became a much more of a uh, hindrance. I've been watching, for some reason, a whole bunch of videos of baby snakes hatching. And the lady that hatches them is in-freaking sane. And I say that with full apology because I don't care what feature it is you're looking at or what you think you're looking at. Baby snakes are not cute. Reptiles are horrible pets. I mean, yeah. I get that there's a sense of accomplishment from successfully incubating a clutch of eggs, regardless of the species. I just never can understand why somebody would want a reptile as a pet. Cats and puppies I get. Those vicious killers are practically human. Found a new anime the other day that is possibly the simultaneously greatest, most ridiculous thing I have ever watched. And it's one of those stupid hero from another world types. And I say stupid because I've never seen a good version of that story. I mean, for crying out loud, it's Sword Art Online, no matter how you slice it. Get sucked into a fantasy world that, for some ridiculous reason, follows a video game logic. And in this particular one, the guy summoned is not a video game player. He's a pro wrestler. And he's a pro wrestler that loves animals. And just the greatest thing I've ever seen in my life, greatest anime moment, I should say, was when he gets to the new world and the princess that summoned him gives the summoned hero his charge. Help us kill all of the demon beasts. And the wrestler just completely indignant. You want me to kill animals for you. He walks over to the princess and puts a hand on her shoulder. And you think for a moment there's going to be this understanding where he's going to explain to her that I don't kill animals. But no, he grabs her around the waist, lifts her up in the air, and plants her head in the ground doing a German suplex. And just leaves her there. And the priest and the guard are standing around with their jaws on the floor. What did he just do to the princess? And then he goes around, spends all of his time taking on quests. I don't know why I keep doing that. The pencil eraser does not erase as well as completely as the Pentel does. He goes around completing quests that deal with quelling these demon beasts who are threatening human civilizations. You know, they're attacking farms. They're burning. In one case, it's a salamander, a fantasy salamander, not a real salamander. So of course it breathes fire, and it's burning caravans every time they go past its volcano. So he goes and he rescues the salamander and takes it home and turns it into a pet because he loves animals. And he's just, the character is just so consistent. You know every time he picks up a quest exactly how it's going to end. And then by the time you get ready for it, you know what's going to happen. He picks up a quest to protect local farmers from orc raiders that are stealing crops and destroying the crops and whatnot. And he's not interested because the orcs aren't animals. And everybody's trying to convince him that orcs are demon beasts, just like any other demon beast. And he's looking at him, he's going, no matter how you look at it, those are just dudes. So they finally convince him to go talk to them. And he walks into the orc settlement and challenges the strongest warrior to a fight. And just fist to fist, all the entire night until the next morning, fights the king of the orcs. And just absolutely ridiculous. but consistently ridiculous, which a lot of those kind of shows can't manage to muster. I usually only get an episode or two into those kind of shows before I get so completely bored with them that I can't continue. I get that way with the original Sword Art Online was okay, but you know, all the ones that came afterwards, I cannot watch them while they're on. I have to wait for them to be done because the only way I can get through the story is to binge watch them. Got to get it done before I get too bored to wait for the next one. And I should really use that as an indicator. If I don't care enough about the series to wait for the next episode, I should probably just give up on the series. I mean, that's a really good litmus test when you think about it. How much of this is even visible on the camera? So there we are right now. There we go. And what I want to do is, obviously I can't just draw something like this and call it my my Inktober ornament. I would have to do something a little more. And what I would like to do is actually get a couple of Christmas tree bows in there. Bows? Boughs? And the Douglas firs are always, in my mind anyway, the quintessential Christmas tree. Oh, how do I draw that? That is, I think I just exceeded my capacity. So if I think about the bow as a tube, with a round end on it, then I can start thinking of how these needles come out to the edge. And around this way. Yeah. Oh, I hate when that happens. So if I consider the ones in the foreground are the ones that have the most foreshortening, then I can draw those first, and maybe even some of the ones coming out this way. Actually, that's working quite well. Yeah, this is. This is why sane people don't draw plants. And yes, I'm looking directly at you, every landscape artist ever. Actually, I did for a semester when I started fine art in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I would, between classes, go out to a local park that was a frequent stop for all the nerds that would play silly things like frisbee golf or ultimate frisbee or any of the other frisbee related ridiculousness that they could come up with. Because there was a forest as part of the back half of that park with some hiking trails. And a couple of the hiking trails had some well-hidden benches. I could go back there and I could set up and just sketch out the plants. I would find something to sketch, and I would go out there every day and spend a couple hours just picking a plant and drawing the entire plant. And it's much easier to do with a reference than trying to remember what a Christmas tree actually looks like from memory. This is pure insanity. Because once I finish this step, I'm going to have to sit here and think about, I can't ink in each one of these needles as a brush stroke. I mean, if I did that, they would just be a solid black brush stroke. And then once I complete them all, it would just be this mass of black. So I've got to sit there and figure out where all the needles are. This is actually kind of a little bit zen if I let it be. But then I've got to sit there and think about where all the shadows on each needle falls. You know, now that I'm doing it this way, one of the things I really like about the Douglas fir is the regularity of the needles that come off of the central branch. I don't know if it's a branch or the anatomy of a plant or what you would call that, but the regularity of it is really one of the things that adds to the beauty, I think, of the Douglas fir, and might be one of the reasons why it's the quintessential Christmas tree, at least out here in this part of the world, where they don't grow. And I say that reminding everybody that I live in Texas, and evergreens in Texas are a very picky species. It's very hard to get most evergreen species to grow because they dry out. Ooh, and I could actually do scales. On this. This would be incredibly difficult to map out. So they would have to grow towards the bottom. And narrow up towards the top. Oh yeah, that's not going to be a quick process at all, is it? I don't know. I'll come back to that. I got to finish this part up. I wish I could find a way to pick appropriate music for these live streams, something to just play in the background. But my big fear of that is accidentally singing along, and then y'all have to listen to me sing. That'll just ruin it forever for everyone. I wish I could think of a really good shorthand version, but when drawing this bunch of needles up this close, where every single one of them gets an actually decent level of light, it makes them all very, very visible, which results in having to draw every single one of them. I should have thought this through before going ahead with this plan. Arrgh. Because once I finish this one, I've got to do quite a few more. Unless in doing this one I can figure out a good shorthand for it. Let's put another one. Let's just do one more. I'll put it right here. We'll go right behind this ornament. That way it'll feel like it's nestled. Well, crud. I just realized the mistake I made. Douglas firs don't have very long needle, I don't know what they're called, needle bunches. They branch out pretty frequently. They come to kind of this hot dog tip. There we go. More of a hot dog shaped tip than a pill shaped tip. Let's see if we can get away with. I'm going to put it behind. Yeah, not happy about this. And they come out in bunches of threes. So this one's coming right at us. It's going to be more. This one's going to be more sideways. Actually, a little bit pointing away. And this one's going to be very pointing away. Oh, yeah, we're coming up on an hour and I haven't picked up any ink yet. I'm sorry, guys. I have very exceeded my capacity to draw this. Alright, but I was doing really good just doing these needles this way, so oh wow, the tedium and the boredom is getting to me when I post this on YouTube. Oh, all of my viewer is going to have to watch 3 hours of me just making little oval shapes. Wee little oval shapes. I mean, they got to get shorter here as it comes more towards the viewer. Oh man. And when it comes down to here, they're going to be thinner, less numerous. because we're getting more into the shadow of the plant. As any kind of tree gets closer to the center where there's more shade, it's going to develop fewer leaves. All right. Then the next crop is going to come out and be more longer, but the branch itself, the skinny core, is only about that big, so I got to bring these guys in more. Sorry, I'm gripping my pencil too tight. Get a little bit of a relaxing stretch in there. And the worst part of this is I know, as I finish this drawing, this kind of detail is going to be such a background element, most people won't notice it. have a sneaking suspicion this is going to be my least boring drawing ever, simply because you don't have to sit there and listen to me chat all the way through it. Not that anybody appears to be, so thank goodness. Yeah, here we go. I didn't put the final row of needles in here. One of the other things I think a lot of people like about Douglas firs is the needles don't actually come to very sharp points. Since this is pointing away and the needles kind of curve in that direction, the central needles on this particular frond are going to be much more visible. Almost straighter. Oh, okay, well, call that done enough for that stage. And I've got to give my hand a good stretch. Let's see what we can do about punching this up with some ink. Oh, I've got to get into these. Let's do... Oh, I'm going to have to do those with brushes. Yeah. I'll do that with a brush. I'll come back. Not looking forward to the pine fronds. See, pine cones are easier. You just draw a simple cone. And then put scales on it. He's got to have little baby horns on here too, because dragons are much more cute with horns. This is actually wearing out my hand. I thought I had, well, actually, I know for a fact that I do have much better endurance in my hand than I have had for the last, I would say 10 months while I was trying to learn to draw again. And I'm starting to get back a lot of my muscle memory. But it's still a tiring, tedious process. Huh, that's what I get for not erasing thoroughly. have to turn that into scales. Just little bitty baby scales. Ooh. I'd like to say the hard part's getting done, but this ain't the hard part. Holy cow, I can tell my eyesight's going. When I draw for this long, it gets much, much harder for me to focus my far vision. For a good few minutes to up to a few hours. I'm just checking how this looks on camera. Yeah, it's okay. Could use a little more definition inside the eggshell to separate it from the background. And that works wonderfully. And the bottom of the egg gets shadow, but it's mostly, if you've seen a reptile egg, they've got a kind of translucence to them that chicken eggs don't have. So I don't want to put a heavy shadow down there. Maybe a heavier shadow just below it, but not on the eggshell itself. There we go. About 15 years ago, I was doing an art program that included airbrush, and I laid out a painting that I was going to draw an airbrush. I very much wanted to be on the par with Vallejo when I first started to airbrush. And so I did a picture with a dragon maiden in it, and had the whole thing laid out. And I never painted it. And I only mentioned that because I looked up just a moment ago and found it leaning against a wall where I had set it down after digging it out accidentally a couple days ago. I didn't know I still had it. But that might be a future project once Inktober gets done. With these ink drawings, I'm not really representing well my my typical art style. Not that I really have a typical art style. I do a lot of atypical art to begin with. But I haven't done a very ambitious airbrush painting in a very long time. So it's probably about time I do one. Whew! This is starting to take a toll. Let's switch over to Brushy Brush and do some brushing. And I'm going to start out here on the edge of my painting where I can make a few more mistakes and correct as I go along. There's going to be more shadow where the needles are closer together. Whoops. And trying to remember to stay on the bottom of these needles as I come around the top of the frond here. We're coming a little bit out of shadow. So while I'm down here, I want these shadows to be darker and thicker. They're going to kind of paint silhouettes of the needles behind them. I'm sorry, of the needles in front of them. Yeah. And then as these needles come out, always important occasionally to step back and make sure you're on track. And I think with what I'm doing right now, I'm about on track as I can be. I'm actually feeling my eyes start to glaze and defocus a little bit. I don't know how much of that is my attention span failing me. I really need to get my Adderall prescription renewed. And how much that is exhaustion. Exhaustion from boredom, not exhaustion from, oh, I've been drawing so long, I'm falling asleep. No, no, no. And let's take a look at the screen. And that looks like far too little effect for far too much work. Let's keep working it. I think these shadows in here are going to connect more. I'm just looking for places where I can deepen the shadow and make it look more like a pine frond. So this shadow can get very much deepened. And you know, that little bit made a huge difference already. Let's keep going and finish these up. I think I was getting a little shy on the shadows just because I was worried that some of the needles wouldn't be seen. But ultimately, I don't believe all of the needles need to be seen, especially these here towards the center. They're just not going to have a favorable light angle on them. I think that trying to get a silhouette of the needles was probably not an effective choice. Much better. And I'm working on the bottom half of this more than the top half of this right now, just because I want to really establish the effect. Yeah? Oh yeah, let's do the top. I think it was a good idea to start with this one off to the side here. Even if it doesn't end up looking very good, it's still going to be out of the way enough that hopefully it won't draw any attention away from the focus, especially being a repeated pattern. I don't want a repeated pattern to take attention away from the focus of the drawing. And I think one of the things I'm going to do differently on the rest is I'm just going to go ahead and use my small pen to outline the needles first. And hopefully it won't look too different from this one that it becomes distracting. Because I was kind of learning on this one, as I said, trying to figure out the do's and don'ts in order to get this effect to work. Yeah. So one of the artists that I listen to frequently, I enjoy more intellectual humor, but intellectual humor that doesn't take itself seriously, which is one of the draws that Weird Al has. He can put together these incredible compositions of music, and then when you listen to the lyrics, you're like, holy cow, how does he come up with that arrangement of words to get that specific image across so effectively? And oh yeah, that's nice. And as a result, I do listen to a lot of parody, but particularly like Tom Lear. Tom Lear outdates Weird Al by a handful of decades. I think I went overboard with this cluster of needles, so I'm going to skip most of them, because the branches get kind of bare out past the very ends of the fronds. You know, I don't even know if frond is the correct word for that collection of needles. So anyway, I listened to Tom Lear. Incredible artist, very funny. Doesn't do parodies as often. He just does very weird songs, but he does do parodies on occasion. And keep in mind, he's from like the 50s and 60s, so his parodies are quite a bit different from like Weird Al version, where he would do a pop song. He would Tom Lear, instead of doing pop songs, would do like a song from a movie, or in one case he parodies a song by why can't I think of his name? Okay, Danny Kaye. Danny Kaye. Oh my goodness. Danny Kaye was one of my favorite actors while he was alive. He did not live too far into my lifespan. He's a much older actor from a much older era. But I kind of discovered Danny Kaye retroactively as a result of, honestly, I can only blame good parenting. Young children should be exposed to The Princess Bride and The Court Jester. And the newest version of The Secret Life of Walter Mitty holds nothing on the original. But Danny Kaye at one time during a radio interview did this kind of semi-impromptu song about how he had learned acting. And the reason why I segued into that, I know it sounds like I lost my train of thought again, because I do that so frequently, so it starts to sound the same after a while. But Tom Lear came from a very different background. Tom Lear actually came from a mathematics background. He was a Harvard professor, and I believe for a time may have even worked at NASA. And that particular fact may be me getting confused with somebody else, which does happen. So, you know, feel free for corrections. I have no problem with that. But Tom Lear became a parodyist after his mathematics career. And he took Danny Kaye's song about acting, and I cannot remember the name that he used in the song. He used the name of a Russian actor, because apparently Russian was hilarious back then. But he took that song and he turned it into a mathematics-themed song. How to steal from other mathematicians. And it was a very, very funny song. Definitely look it up. And if you're interested at all in that sort of thing, he does have a whole song called New Math. And if your kids have ever come home with math homework, since it's the school season again, this happens frequently, that looks like simple algebra, but when you sit down and you look at the problem and it makes absolutely no sense to you, you know you're looking at new math. And Tom Lear had a very dim view of new math. It's been plaguing this country for so long that even Tom Lear, an old lyricist, has been able to express his views on the idiocy that is new math. And I know people will have their own opinions on that, and you're welcome to them. And I allow everybody to have their opinions on any topic that I have an opinion on. It's the only fair thing to do. As long as they let me rant and keep their opinions to themselves, I'm fine. I have a similar view on politics, which is a little bit simpler, and it simply goes, you're welcome to your political view as long as you keep it to yourself. And I will try to keep my political views to myself because I know I can be kind of controversial in some of my political views, but I assure you I am not the kind of person to jump on a train. Just because a view has momentum, an opinion is popular, does not make it right. And the total summation of my politics tends to be, you're wrong. The end. I don't need to correct anybody because, frankly, there's often no truly correct opinion to have. I mean, frankly, at the end of the day, it's all about liberties. And modern politics has started to devolve into a debate about who gets liberties and who doesn't get liberties. And I think our founding fathers understood that either everybody gets the same liberties or nobody gets liberties at all. And what I mean by that is, if you have a group of lawmakers who are cherry picking who gets to have liberties and freedoms, eventually they're going to pick you to lose yours. And that's not just rampant paranoia talking. That's history. You look at any country that has ever gone through the process, Russia becomes notable. The Russian Revolution to replace the czars ended up replacing these horribly violent tyrants with a government that was just as bad, because they wanted to maintain, they got rid of the tyrants, but they wanted to maintain that communism. And it just doesn't work out that way. Either, sorry, I've got to turn this. Either everybody gets liberties or nobody does. And it's kind of like when you were a kid and your mother gave you some cookies and she told you to share them with your siblings. You found out very quickly that either everybody gets cookies or nobody does. And I really hate the modern political temperature, environment, where we have to try everybody in the media before it ever gets to court. We never find out the truth of something until somebody's life has already been ruined. Because everybody needs to have their opinion. And if there's something going on that Celebrity X hasn't shared their opinion on, well, by gum, we're not going to talk about it until I share my opinion. And a lot of times they end up sharing an opinion that is really designed for little more than advancing their own careers. It puts them in the news, it gets them exposure, it's like free advertisement. And celebrities really have no business publicly expressing political views, because they're not politicians, they're something else. Fashionistas or actors or singers or something else that they are experts in, but their expertise is not in politics. Their expertise is not in economy. There we go. Coming along, getting to the end of this one. Oh, still have probably about a half an hour to go, and we are 2 hours in. Oh my goodness. This will be the longest one yet. Who do I got in my channel? I've got nobody in my channel chatting. All right, that's fine. I've got too far to go to get to my keyboard anyway. I really need to find a better setup. Yesterday I was talking about some character design that I was going through while trying to develop an indie game. And I keep getting hung up on the process because I'm not a programmer. I've never learned a programming language. And, oh dear, this is going to be rough. And so I've never made a lot of headway on pursuing that goal. That's more of a back burner goal that ends up getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back again. And the original idea for that goal was basically income based, not in a get rich quick kind of way, but small residuals from that kind of a product can make a big difference over time. And I was trying to think of a product that I could put out where I could get a residual. And I'm not a writer, so books were, everybody thinks of writing a book. And it's always a possibility. I could probably do it. But I don't consider myself a very good writer, and it's a bad sign when you get bored of your own story before the end of chapter 1. So I end up with, I've got a file somewhere with 20 or 30 chapter 1s that I've never gone back to revisit because they're just not worth spending any more time on. So I haven't finished them and I haven't shared them. Brushy. Let's re-square the... Need a second camera so when I get down there and do that intricate stuff with my hand in front of the camera, you can actually, see what I'm doing down here. But anyway, I lighted upon the idea of a video game because I was at art school at the time, and I went to art school in the first place to do video games. I wanted to get into... Well, while I was in school, I kept telling the counselors movie effects or video games. But I think, honestly, I've always been more interested in video games. Holding my breath while I made that line. Don't know why. And going back to Tom Lear, though, the reason I brought him up in the first place is I've always got a lyric or a beat or something going on in the back of my head. And lately it's been a bunch of Tom Lear songs. And it might be an indication that I have to change up my Pandora mix. I hear my phone vibrating in the other room. I accidentally left it on the charger, and I accidentally left it on mute. Whoops. I'll have to get through this last little bit here as fast as I can. I know the stream is running a little bit long. I've got some other things that I was planning on doing today that I have got to get back to. Not only that, but you feel a slight migraine coming on right now. I had a bad one slam me to the ground yesterday. Oh, it stunk. It was very bad. Got suddenly taken by it. It was no indication that I was going to have a migraine. And then all of a sudden I just felt sick and dizzy. I could barely talk, not because I was having stroke-like symptoms, which has happened to me before with migraines, but because I couldn't remember the freaking words I wanted to use. And I mean, it felt like brain damage. It just came out of nowhere and ended up popping some Excedrins and sitting down in the chair with my eyes closed because, well, it was a migraine. I mean, if you haven't had a migraine, it's kind of hard to explain to you, but yeah, it's a migraine. You close your eyes. Hang on tight and wait for the ride to come to a complete stop. That side's actually looking really good. Well, woke up a couple minutes later because my shirt was soaking wet. I had suddenly fallen asleep with a drink in my hand, my glass of water that I had used to wash down the Excedrin, and I poured the water down the front of my shirt. I swear I was only asleep for maybe 10 minutes or so. Couldn't have even been 10 minutes. It couldn't have been that long at all. It was just long enough for my hand to relax and dump the glass of ice water down my shirt. woke me right up, and no migraine. It was gone like that, as fast as it came in. Usually when I get a migraine that comes in that fast, it's going to be there for a few days. Ugh. Stretch my hand cramp out again. You know, it's weird doing these Twitch streams. I'm very, very far outside of my element doing these. These are not something that I typically would normally do. Not the drawings, but the actual streaming. Although, to be honest, the drawing's not something I would normally do on my own without the streaming. Just because, as I keep saying, I've gotten out of the practice of it the last few years. Oh, this is going to look fantastic in a year or two when I finish it. I keep holding my breath when I make these lines. It's a bad habit. Might be the reason I've got that migraine coming in. we've got a whole new studio for studio software, not a physical studio, for recording these live streams and sending them out. And I haven't been able to get it to function yet. I'm missing something that syncs up the studio with my Twitch account. But once I get that up and running, I should be able to add things like music and stuff like that that can just play in the background and be something to fill the silence. Because right now, the only thing that's filling the silence is my own tinnitus. And I'm sorry, but I can't share that on the stream. But we're coming to the end of this one, so if you're watching the live stream replay on YouTube, wow, holy cow, why? But I did not do a time-lapse of yesterday's drawing. I think I'm definitely going to add a time-lapse of this one that will hopefully be up later today. But before I can put either of those two things up, I've got other things that need to be taken care of, so they're not going to be up super rapidly like normal. I say like normal when on Tuesday I put it up at 10 o'clock at night, and yesterday it didn't go up until almost 5 o'clock. Because I kept getting pulled away from my chair to do other things. On Tuesday I left my edit compiling and forgot to look at it, forgot to come back and check on it. I did not set a timer in my phone to remind myself to come back and look at it. And I did not remember until late at night when I was getting ready to settle down and play a video game, and I sat down in front of my computer, and there's Premiere Pro staring right at me, all innocent like. There was supposed to be, a couple years ago, a Hong Kong Phooey live-action movie coming out. And I could not think of a worse use for CG graphics in a movie. I mean, Underdog was bad enough. And the Smurfs, the most recent Smurfs movie was actually pretty good. Way better than it had any business being. But the ones where they came to New York, holy cow, those were the worst. Those were monstrosities. Whoever decided those movies needed to be made should be tried in an international court of law. And the only reason I say that is because I can't think of a higher court to try a monster like that in. But Underdog, I mean, it didn't even, it barely referenced the original source material, which was bad to begin with. But then they put it in a world full of humans, so the underdog had to be an actual dog. I mean, it just made no sense. Now they're talking about Hong Kong Phooey. And you can't do that. I mean, Hong Kong Phooey was a janitor, but he was a dog. His assistant was a cat. You can't put that in a world full of humans and expect it to look right. Last year there was talk about, pardon me, talk about the Little Mermaid being the next live-action Disney remake following the commercial success of The Lion King, which turned out to have very little commercial success. Beauty and the Beast had a lot of commercial success, and I attribute that more to Emma Watson than to got the name recognition of a star that everybody wanted to see go on to do something outside of Harry Potter, continuing to act, unlike very many of her colleagues from that series. Daniel Radcliffe is still acting, but he does a lot of stage work. I think he's starting to do more film and television over the pond, but not a lot coming here. So I think there was some commercial excitement over seeing Emma Watson as Belle, more so than any kind of excitement over seeing a live-action Beauty and the Beast. And I think the absolute failure of The Lion King to get any traction in the box office finally opened up Disney's eyes. And so The Little Mermaid, instead of going to theaters, looks like they kind of ended production early so it would have a much cheaper budget, wrapped up the CG effects, and they're going to present it on the wonderful world of Disney, which hasn't even been a thing for years. They're bringing it back for just to present The Little Mermaid. Which I think is a good idea. It would be a much better TV adaptation. Any of the live-action versions would be much better for TV adaptation than for movie distribution. There we go. A little dragon egg Christmas ornament. I have to think of the year again before I put the wrong year on there. There we are. Finito Ornament for October 17th. Thank you very much for joining me on this very long drawing. I got a little bit here on the snowflake. Let's pull that out so you can see the snowflake. Excellent. Yeah, there we go. Very long drawing for October 17th. Subject being Ornament. And I'll see you tomorrow.